Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, you could never look at my secret. Oh no, suddenly. Hello, Levy! Let's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat. We are number 231 Fireside Chat episodes, at least. Today, we have a special guest, Elizabeth Jack. Elizabeth is an American equalist who writes about gender issues, focusing primarily on sexual and domestic abuse. She has a left-leaning but non-feminist approach to gender and a penchant for debate. So, welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I watched your talk that you did. I think it was for Cafe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was in Ottawa.
Yeah, and it was well, that was probably a while ago. Is that fair? Like a few years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2019 sounds about right.
And you've been I guess like we should give a little backstory as to like how you came to be on this show. So you used to be there on Facebook in back in the Stone Age. There was in internet years. That's basically like, you know, Cretaceous period. We had a Facebook group. It was not the one managed by us, but it was like, you know, people who were fans put it together, and it was very active for a while. And there were a lot of people on there, and of course, you know, because it's the internet, people fight and things like that. But it was good for a while, and I know that you were part of it because I guess I was adding people as friends from that group that, you know, if they said something or if I liked their posts or whatever, you know, I would just add them. I'd be like, oh, this person's from this group, right? So if you're active in the conversation is how I saw it. I would add you. So I guess like that's how that started. And then that group, it got shut down by Facebook years ago. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was, you know, we violated the terms, which were kind of like constantly changing. I don't know who it was specifically. It wasn't me. I'm not banned on Facebook. I'm banned on Twitter, so that's different. You know. But that did happen, and so like everybody kind of went into their own little circles. And yet I was still in touch with people like you and a few others. And I saw you made a post, and I don't wanna misquote you, but you had criticisms of either the Honey Badger Radio Facebook group, the Honey Badgers in general, or the men's rights movement in a more broad sense. And I don't, like I said, I don't wanna tell you what you were saying. I wanna ask you, like, help me clarify, because I don't. You know, it was a while ago, and then right after that I said, hey, you want to talk about it? You know, and I went into your comments, and then we ended up talking to each other and set this up. So give me a little bit of what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll take a step back first because I kind of have a lot of hills to die on about how like human rights movements market themselves in general, like not just the MRM, not just you guys, not just anybody in particular, but like any movement. I feel like we as people are pretty bad at talking across the aisle, and we don't really think about advocating as marketing, but it is marketing. So when I see us sort of allying with people whose interests are not the same as ours, I kind of, or like when I see us sort of delving into like really jargony sort of discourse with people who are not already a part of our movement, or even like God bless him, I get what Paul Elam's trying to do, but you know, there is a problem when people kind of approach the normies that way, right? Like, and then people like you and me have to go like, no, you don't understand. That's, you know, that's not what we're doing here. Yeah. And, you know, kind of like explain that to the normies, right?
Yeah.
So my criticism was largely about in that particular post was largely about how we do activism and advocacy as a movement, and how we have kind of reached a point where we've stopped differentiating ourselves as hard from some of those more traditionalist movements that I think are like fundamentally incompatible with men's rights.
That sounds like something we should dig a little deeper into, but first, I guess I don't know if it's your gain, but you're peaking a little bit, like there's a little bit of when you make like an S sound or a T sound, it like clicks, there's like a bit of feedback. So I don't know if it's your gain or whatever, but we'll just try, see if there's if that changes. I don't know if you can make any adjustments, but otherwise I can hear you fine. It's not like there's, so okay, so I think I know what you mean. I have it, it's tough. Like, I feel like, I'll put it to you this way. I started doing this work 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I considered myself to be pretty solidly on the left in terms of my politics. And I never thought that men's rights should be something that should be partisan. Like, I didn't think it should be. I know, and I still don't think it should be. But as I've been doing this more and more, and most of what I do, I guess, to be clear, I don't consider what I do here activism, because I think activism is like, maybe I just have like a incomplete picture of what it is, but to me activism is like, rallies and protests and, campaigns and things like that. And I am more of an advocate. I'll talk about stuff, right? And I try to do it in I try to do it in a non-partisan fashion. And I think that over the years I've changed my outlook a lot. Part of it is, for me, it's about I'm trying to be practical, because I think that, and I mean, Allison probably, she's the person who runs Honey Badger Radio. She probably doesn't see eye to eye with me on this, but Allison always says that we need something completely new, right? Like a new way to like organize everything, right? A new story that we all operate under. And I don't,
as MRAs, as honey badgers,
as MRAs, as just like as a society, because we're in a world now where men's contributions are not just taken for granted. I mean, they're actively shit on, they're frowned upon, they're criticized, this isn't even getting into anything dealing with the legal or the political or the actual like policies and things that we want to change. Because the thing is, what I've come to realize is that if you can't change people's opinions or attitudes about men as a group, then you're never going to get support. So if I say, well, what about prostate cancer? And people laugh at me and they say, well, that doesn't really happen. And I'm like, well, look at how much breast cancer gets, for funding versus how much prostate cancer gets. And they will, people will we have this, it's not just a blind spot. Like there's a blind spot. Like if you tell people, well, men in the Middle East, they have a bunch of problems all their own. People will say, no, that's impossible. Like, it's impossible. And I think it's got to do with the way that we view men as a group and the way that we view women as a group. And I think it's a massive obstacle. And where things are getting so bad now that you can't even begin, like I said, you can't even begin talking about things like, male suicide and paternity rights and father absence without saying we have to care about men. I mean, people take for granted that men essentially maintain the infrastructure, like you and I are talking to each other because of men, right now.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
So like, I think then, I guess I'm getting a little, I'm getting on into the weeds. What I'm wondering about is, what do you think about, because I don't know what Allison's proposing, but your concerns seem to be that there is a like a conservative like push happening, or like what are the things that you're worried about?
Yeah, so I don't care if somebody's like liberal or conservative, right? Like I don't care what your thoughts are on economics or like immigration or all of this other, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not worried about that. But when I see, like, when I'm talking to somebody and they call themselves a men's advocate, and I'm like, cool, what do you mean by that? What do you think about the draft? And they're like, oh, well, why wouldn't you want to fight for your country, you pussy? And I talk to them about domestic abuse, and well, what, you're not going to fight back? She's half your size. And I'm like, oh, you're not an MRA, you're a traditionalist. You have no interest in these issues.
I'm not even sure.
But there's a ton of those people in our discourse spaces.
Yeah.
And like, I think that means we've marketed ourselves wrong.
That's possible. So we're talking about, I mean, I guess from your perspective, you're talking about tactics or approaches or maybe optics to some degree. Like you have people that still have a lot of blue pill thinking that are sort of in the space. But I would dare to say though, there is, when it comes to things like the ones you brought up, like that, why don't you fight back, or why are you letting this woman beat you up, or why aren't you dying for your country, or whatever. Those do strike initially as traditionalists, but feminists believe in that stuff too. So so like it's
no, they do, and there's I have a whole thing about how feminism is like traditionalism masquerading as progressivism in a number of ways, and like to your point and to my point, what I think we should be doing is seeing these incoming people as people to red pill, not people that are already on our side. We need to think of them as like somebody we need to talk to across the aisle, just like we do with feminists. Yeah. Like we it's like we assume that because they're like in our groups, in our like discussion forums, that they're already with us, and a lot of the time they're not. They got there because they had this arithmetic in their heads where they said, okay, feminists are left and I'm on the right, therefore any non-feminist space or any anti-feminist space must be like people that already agree with me.
Yeah. And that's also tricky. I mean, I do say this a lot, that feminism does come from the left, but that the issue is not feminism itself, but rather valuing the female perspective over the male perspective, because there are plenty of women on the right, or conservative women, and the men that support them, that will essentially advocate for the exact same stuff. So it's not real. I mean, I've talked about this on my show a lot, and I know that I've pissed people off or confused them, but I think that left and right is, in a way, it's feminine and masculine in the way that it sort of like bears out. This has nothing to do with things like religion or traditional values or whatever. It's nothing to do with those. It's about like whether or not you value security or if you value liberty. And women tend to value security, and men tend to value liberty, and that's where the clash has. And that's why we have two wings. And so, but setting that aside, I think more importantly than that, or even like bigger picture than that, is there are feminine ways of seeing the world, of operating within the world, and there are masculine ways. And feminine doesn't mean women, because there are men who operate in those feminine ways, and there are women who operate in those masculine ways. Like
you're talking about like pre-industrial archetypes.
Yeah, sort of. Like the people I work with, Honey Badger Radio was created by women. It's run by women. I'm the producer. But like I work for women mainly, right? And these women are women that, like the way that Allison puts it is, it's like seeing the consequences of your actions and being like gay, or your value or your worth being gay, like judged by that, right? So women tend to not see the world as how they affect it, but rather how it affects them. And men see it the other way around.
Well, because that's how they're taught, Yeah. We teach our young girls that like the world revolves around them, and that everything needs to be comfortable for them, and we teach our young boys that they need to make it comfortable for women. Yep,
exactly. And so, that hasn't really. I don't think. Not only do I not think it's changed, I think it's gotten more extreme in that way. And
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
Yeah, and because of that, I think men, young men, are trying to break free of it, and that's why I don't know if you saw this data, this recent data, that said Generation Z men or boys are becoming more and more right wing, and Generation Z girls are becoming more and more left wing. And
Yeah, because the left panders to women and
does.
demonizes men.
Yes,
like
but
who's gonna join a club that hates them?
right, of course, and but I think even though that's the way that they describe it is left and right, I think it's more like men moving towards, like, they want to be free from from like authority. They want to be able to operate freely. They don't want to have to, like, essentially serve women or serve the state or serve whatever. And women are looking, these young girls, they're looking for men to serve them, and that's why I don't think, see, they're describing it as left and right or conservative and liberal, but it's not that. It's the men are grasping at masculinity, whatever they can get their hands on, right? That's why people like Andrew Tate are popular. It's not because he is an icon or of some kind. It's because he's unabashedly masculine. He just says, this is what I am, even if it's a kind of cartoony version, which I think it is. But it doesn't matter, because when you're a teenage boy and there's a high likelihood you don't know who your father is because your mother excluded him from your life, you're going to look for some other icon or model to go after, and that's what they're doing. And meanwhile, the girls are getting what you said, the constant, like, propaganda about girl power and all this. But it is all there's a larger division between men and women now in this youngest generation than there was before, which in a way, I think it's obviously like a part of feminism. What I'm getting at is, like, these young men, they're only going to these places because they don't know where else to go. And you're right, the left is offering them nothing. I mean, did you see Shoe on Head? Do you know who that is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
yeah, I love Shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she had a really insightful video.
Yeah. So
on that topic.
Did you see that? Then you saw, because we used to have Shoe on our show, like, all the time, like way back in 2015 or something, and she's still friends with us, like, on social media and stuff. And she went through and she was like, well, here are what the people on my side of the fence are saying about men, and it's just demonization. And she even made recommendations. She was like, well, here are some good guys, and I looked at them, and they're all feminists. I mean, it's the same song and dance. They're not going to change anything, because they haven't been able to figure out that all men want is to be left to do what they want to do. It's to realize their own potential without interference, without people telling them what they have to do.
What a man is, what a man isn't.
What a man is, what a man isn't. And most people are guilty of that. They think that man is something you become, women is something you are, right?
That's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, like, there's
what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that a boy, let's go to ancient cultures, okay? When you are in a tribe and you're a boy and you are coming of age, whatever that is, maybe 13 or something, there is, like, a kind of they would do some kind of ritual, or there'd be some trial, right, that the adult men would put the boy through. Maybe they take him on a hunt with them or something. And when he comes back, he is basically referred to as a man now, because he has done something, right? Some service to the tribe, right? This is like the hero's journey, which is like, Joseph Campbell's archetype story, which has been used in, like, all the most popular films of a person, usually a boy or a young man, in, like, a mundane life, and then something pulls him out of that into a world outside. It's Star Wars, basically. And then he comes back and he's different, right? It's The Hobbit. It's countless other examples.
Every epic story.
Every epic story that involves that sort of cycle. With women, there used to be something like that. But there isn't anymore. And I don't know when it changed. I think probably in the last 100 years or so. But the idea of a woman becoming a girl, becoming a woman, and that comes with, sort of parallel or complementary responsibilities. It doesn't exist in women now. Women are basically, they have nothing that they're expected to do. And I think the reason for that is things like the feminist movement that have said, well, women are perfect already. This is why you get the kinds of female stories you get now, right? where women just have to realize that they're awesome and there's nothing to learn and there's nothing to grow because there can be no recognition of your impact on the world as a woman. And I mean, one could say that one of the ways that I think that does change for women is when they have children, because I think that's the one thing that makes women different from men, right? And you can see that in some, like, if I wanted to use pop culture, I assume you're a nerd like me.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Okay, yeah, so like if you've seen like Terminator or Aliens, those are examples. Like Sarah Connor's protecting her son, right? And Ellen Ripley's protecting this girl. So like there's like this motherhood thing that is like, you know, that's why they're successful, because we on some deep level we're like, this is real, right? Even if it involves cyborgs from the future or aliens, it doesn't matter because the root of this is a real thing. And
right, and meanwhile we're told that like people like Captain Marvel are the first female protagonist who
yeah,
has, like,
exactly,
you know, any level of capability or badassery.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say, well, that's just what, you know, I've heard this from, I don't want to necessarily name their politics, but there are people who generally were apolitical, but they were interested in pop culture. They will say, well, they're just making these men into these women and they're just having them behave like men. But that's not true either, because the men they have like an arc. They have to overcome something. They have to recognize the impact of their actions on the world. And these Captain Marvel characters, they don't. They're just perfect. And people just have to figure that out, right? So
and Ellen Ripley did have that arc. She did have to like overcome. And you know, she got her ass kicked and she had to like come back and keep going.
Well, that was the thing. We didn't root for her because she was already great. We were afraid for her. This is why are the, well, I mean, I know we're getting into like pop culture stuff, but just a minor digression if you'll entertain me. Why are the protagonists of every horror movie a woman? Almost every horror movie. Because we care about what happens to them. Yes, we don't want them to get killed by the big scary slasher guy. And so like there is like a place, you know, in our collective unconscious, I guess, where we have a certain way that we, you know, relate to women in the same way that we relate to men. But I think that's become really skewed culturally speaking. And so if the culture is leaning that way, and like young people are coming up in this and they're seeing it, I do think a lot of this is evolved, or it's natural, it's part of our nature. But the extra push is definitely socialized, which is what you were talking about, right? Like you do this enough and women will grow up believing that they can, first of all, nothing they do matters, right? Because they don't have an impact. That means that if they do something immoral, it doesn't matter, right? So I guess I don't think we really disagree that much on the what you were concerned with, like this people who are basically still blue-pilled or maybe purple-pilled that are talking about men in a less sympathetic way than they should. Because I think that's the important problem, right?
Yeah, it is, and I think we would really benefit from like making a point to differentiate ourselves from that, because that's the stereotype, right? I mean, it's not the only stereotype about us, but this idea that we want to roll things back, that, you know, we want men in the field and women in the kitchen. And, you know, we criticize feminists for not calling out their own crazies or for not calling out their own misguided members. And, you know, I try to make a point, you know, when I'm out there, when I'm talking to people, I try to make a point of like, this is what you think we are. It's not what we are. And the person who says that doesn't speak for me, and they really don't speak for the movement. In
general, no, I would say they don't. Although I would ask though, what do you think gender relations should look like? Like do you have like an idea of what the society you want to look like appears to be?
Yeah, you just mean like how men and women interact with each other?
Like, or like how would we want the world, like I guess our society arranged so that it looks more like what you want, like whatever the fairness or justice or equality or whatever.
I want equality under the law. I want, honestly, I want like a certain level of gender blindness. Not like, I mean, I understand there are going to be like differences, right? Especially physiological stuff. But, like, I understand that you're going to have way more firefighters that are men, way more soldiers that are men. That's fine. I don't care about that. But when you're interacting with a person, I would like for us not to make assumptions about who they are and what they're like based on gender stereotypes. Like I go to a lot of, like I'll go to a party and I'll hear somebody just like casually say, when you're walking down an alley and you see a guy, so you're scared. And I'm like, oh, do you feel that way about Muslims? Do you feel that way about racial minorities? What the hell is wrong with you? Like I would like a world where we stop that. And, like you mentioned, maybe this is evolutionary and maybe it is, but we're humans. We put somebody on the moon. We have indoor plumbing. We have alarm clocks. We subvert our nature for the way we function in society every day. If we can do that, if we can get up before the sun, if we can, poop inside, we can figure out how to not be so like gynocentric.
I agree. I think that we can, like, I would, okay, this is why I said that, because I think that to some degree, men will always put women before themselves, to some degree. I think that it's been hyper amplified. And I think there's a reason for it, the limiting factor being reproduction, but also I think we have been, if you consider that we've been sexually selected from the beginning, if I'm just making the evolutionary argument for it, I think that if a man sacrifices himself for his wife for whatever reason, like he felt like he had to, I wouldn't call that gynocentric. I think that sometimes I think the word gynocentrism gets thrown around a little bit too much, because I think that the men have a nature, like I said, and it's okay. I just don't want that to get, blown out of proportion. I think that where that begins, where we can change that, is what we're lacking is that women are not getting respect. And when I say that, because people are like, what do you mean? Respect,
I think I'm with you, but you finish your thought.
Like respect, and men are not getting love. So I think that when I say respect, Tim Goldage, exactly. It's like women are not earning anything, but they're expected to get love, and they do unconditionally. And I think that has to change. But the only way that will change is if women are held accountable to a degree commensurate with men, and men should also get love without, condition to some degree. Again, I know that men prefer to earn, and I'm only saying that speaking as a man, but I would imagine that women would like that too. They'd like to know that they worked hard and did something, and people are like, hey, you did well. Like today's my birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. You'll never believe how old I am. But anyway, my wife, we don't have a lot of money, and so my wife was like, well, what do you want for your birthday? And I was like, you know what? I don't care. And she offered to get me a cake, but I'm like, we're not eating any carbs, no sugar, no nothing. And so what she made me was my favorite. My family's from Puerto Rico. I grew up in Chicago. In Chicago, we would get this little Puerto Rican restaurant down the street from my house that I used to go to and pick up what we call carne frita, which is basically, it's like pork belly cut into cubes and deep fried. It's delicious. All it is pork, okay? And my wife got some, and she cooked it for me, and I ate it, and I thought, man, this is the best thing that you have ever done. Like, I was so grateful. And of course, she loves to hear that. So my point being, I know that women want to get props for something like they really did, as opposed to, oh, well, you're a woman, therefore, right? That's just, and men wouldn't want that either. So I guess what I think needs to change is that we need to women have to be accountable in the same way that men are. So I don't have I'm not the kind of person that thinks men should never be blamed. If they do something wrong, obviously we want to lean that way. And I guess
do. When men do something wrong, we do call them out. We hold them accountable.
Yeah, of course. And we should do the same for women. That's where, because I think that that's probably the primary disparity. I mean, I just saw a story. It's not a story. It was a clip from an interview. And there was this woman, she was on a podcast, and she was talking about how she was angry with a man she was dating. And so she made, like, he had kids with somebody else. and she called Child Protective Services and told them that his kids were in trouble and that he was doing something to his kids because she was just angry at him and wanted to get back at him. And the cop showed up at this guy's house. Fortunately, like he didn't get his kids taken away from him. But the point is, she did that, and everybody on the pod, they were laughing about it, you know. And I was like, you see, this is when I say, you know, like there's problems with false allegations. There's problems with women using the police state against men, or using whatever, like they use the government, they use other men, right? This is a big problem because it's not just because they're doing it, it's that they can do it, and there will be no consequences. Like she was literally on a podcast joking about it. This is what I mean by accountability.
Amy Schumer bragging about sexually assaulting a drunk unconscious person.
Yeah,
and
or
getting praised across the country for it.
Yeah, and Cardi B, you know, what Cardi B like bragged about how she would have sex with men, and while they were, I guess she would drug them or something, and then she would rob them. You know, and so like, you know, and then she's like a multi-million-dollar musician. Like she can just say that. Nobody goes, wait a minute. Like Johnny Depp almost like lost everything. For
I'm
bullshit
curious to see
allegations.
if anything happens to Lizzo after the allegations have been made about her.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we are talking about celebrities, but it's a good example. You know, one of the things we do on our channel. So I guess I should make it clear that whatever goes on at whatever used to go on at the Honey Badger Radio Facebook group is not what we do on the show. So it's like you're gonna get people that are probably gonna put their foot in their mouth, or they're figuring things out. That's, you know, I'm really charitable because I know that people are coming at this is like a completely unique perspective that no one has, like in general.
Show is more geared towards like movement members who are like trying to keep up to date on like the issues and the current events, and rightly aren't most of your audience like, you know, there aren't like regular people walking around the street who have no idea about any of this, who, you know, are going to listen to this and go like, oh, you had so and so on the show, that must be what you think. I do. So I do try to get guests from different walks of life so that people can't easily like throw us into a box. They will anyway. Right. They will anyway, because this is what the media does, right? Like right now, I think like when the red pill comes up in any conversation on the mainstream, like if you're looking at BBC or CBC or whatever it is, right? They're gonna basically say, oh, Andrew Tate, oh, Fresh and Fit, oh, you know, the manosphere, like these guys. And it's like, well, we can't control what those guys do or say. And sometimes I think that they become really popular and it's kind of artificial. Like, right.
No, it's okay. Sometimes I think they become popular artificially because, like, you know, you're like, I've been doing this for 10 years and nobody knows who we are. And yet, you know, Andrew Tate is huge or whatever. And it's because he's like a perfect straw man of what we are, you know? So
he's inflammatory in a way that you're
not. Exactly. And it's, you know,
and
it doesn't.
He's very like status quo for all the stuff he says that's inflammatory. Like he wants men to be meat shields.
Yeah.
You know, he talks a lot about that. Like, that's very traditional.
Yeah, he's totally a traditionalist. I mean, a lot of these guys are. But what my point is that, so we don't really get heard, and we end up fighting the propaganda more than just talking about the issues. And that's what we try to do. So, like, what our channel exists for mostly is to equip people with the knowledge to talk about this stuff in public without... Well, I mean, I don't know if you can avoid any aggression because people have like a knee-jerk reaction to criticism against women. But yeah, we try to help people understand this is what is going on in the world. This is why, you know, these things are talked about in this way. But anyway, I'm not. So I will ask this though, because this is like the thing that I'm running up against right now. So I would like all the things that you said. I want justice, right? So we call it equality under the law. I just want things to be just. I just want like people to be gender blind, as it were, right? If somebody does a crime or they're trying to get custody of their kids or whatever, their gender should not factor in, okay? But then there's like the other thing is that I think in general, most men and women want to like pair up, find someone to love, you know, marry them and start a family. I think that and we can call that trad, but I think that's what just I don't even think calling it traditional is necessarily accurate, because I think this is just what most people want.
There's a million ways to like actually approach that.
Yeah.
You know, and that you could do it in a traditional way, you could do it in a non-traditional way, but I think most people do want like a long-term live-in partner and kids.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm married, no kids yet. We're working on it, but yeah, I don't think of our relationship as like, you know, whatever trad is, even though she does do a lot of the cooking. But I never said that's what she has to do, right? So, and we both
Some people
work.
like to cook. That's fine. Most people cook.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's not even saying that women cook. Like
no,
they're adults.
Yeah, sure. So, so I got some super chows. I'm gonna read them really quick. Fresh Water Squid didn't send a message, but sent us 3 different donations: $5, $25, and $20. So thank you, Freshwater Squid. I think I have a sound effect for you. Let me go ahead and play that. So.
A flush, a cash.
And Fireside Chat number 231 sends us $5 and says, "Hi Elizabeth, I agree in the sense that an individualist evaluation of a person should be considered over an evaluation based on groups and stereotypes. But do you think a world where we do not consider stereotypes is possible? I think human nature implicitly built in our ability to evaluate through stereotypes. Do you disagree? Can you expand your thoughts here? Thanks."
That's a really good question. It's a really interesting question. I think we're always going to form heuristics based on our experience. So if you go through the world and, you know, you talk to feminists who they've been in like a string of abusive relationships and they like automatically stereotype, you know, if they're heterosexual, they're like, oh, men are violent. Oh, men are abusive. Like they didn't do that on purpose. That was their experience. So they formed a stereotype. And that's, I mean, we should question that. We should ask them to question that. But I think inevitably, stereotypes are going to occur, and we just kind of need to have, and we do as a society, not about men, and you know that's the problem, but as a society we do have conversations about like, okay, you may have seen a lot of people that look like this and do this, but the problem comes in when you make the assumption that someone who looks like that does that.
Well, thank you, Fireside Chat number 231.
All right.
So, if you guys have any other questions or comments, you can send a super chat or super chow. Super chows are here, super chats are here. And I will read them on the air. So, what do you think about, well, let me ask you this. How long have you been doing this kind of work?
Like 15 years.
15 years? Yeah.
It's been a minute, yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like in the last 15 years, you have changed? We all change, but like,
I have.
In what ways do you think you've changed?
I learned to touch grass a little bit.
That's always good, yeah.
I used to be the person who like, I thought there was a war, you know, and men and women hated each other, and like everything was awful, and like I'd be that person at a party, right?
Yeah.
Who'd just interrupt every conversation, like,
why are we even partying right now? There's no time. Smash.
Yeah, like I just
start talking like Liam
down.
Neeson in one of his movies. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of learned how to do that a little bit more diplomatically.
Yeah.
You know, I was really aggro. I was really like confrontational. And I just kind of learned that like that is not how you get people on your side. Like I really admire Daryl Davis, who is not a men's rights activist, but is a very
Oh, you're talking about the guy who hung out with the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he just walked right into the lion's den and started making friends with people, and like no joke converted Klansmen out of racism with the power of friendship. Like that guy is a huge hero of mine. And I'm like, well, I could go and shout at people about their like tacit misandry, or I could befriend people, talk to them like a human being, meet them where they are, and, you know, try and gently get them to question some of the stuff they believe that might be harmful.
Why do you think they didn't kill him right away?
I think because it's a really interesting question.
I mean, I know this is really dark, but I'm just saying, if it's the KKK, and I'm not saying I doubt this, but why wouldn't they just erase him and hide the body and cover for each other, and then he's just gone? Like, why did they let him in and even talk to him to begin with, if there wasn't already like some hope there?
Because he did this thing. This is my opinion. I don't know the guy, and you know, I've never met him, but I think he does something that advocates don't usually do, which is sit politely and listen to the person he thinks is harming everybody. Like, he gives them courtesy first.
Sure.
And he meets them where they are, and they see him as non-threatening. They give him an opportunity to be what I call a polite counterexample to their, you know, preconceived notions. And the cognitive dissonance starts to become hard to ignore.
Yeah.
You know, you can't hate Black people if you've never like sat down and talked to one.
Right.
Or like if you have sat down and talked to one is what I mean. Like you eventually learn, like, oh, well, this guy's all right.
Yeah, I just wonder about that because you know, I think that we have an idea in our head of what a group like the KKK is like, and then you hear this story and it's like, well, wait, how is he not lynched? Like, how is... And I think it's because, well, you know what, they're people too, and maybe they have, you know, like, one thing I've learned is that, and I'm not saying this about the KKK per se, but I mean in general when it comes to like associations with groups. I had a guest on named Nama Cates, and Nama does a series of podcasts. She used to do like a crime, one of those real crime podcasts, and she looked into Alec Manassian, the guy who ran down people in like a van in Toronto, I think it was in Canada, and he was reported by the media as an incel. Later it turned out that he was like just really stressed out his job, and he lied about being an incel and that being the reason, but it doesn't really matter. It put her on this path. She ended up going down the rabbit hole of like understanding incels, and she did a series of videos, and she's very sympathetic, and I've had her on the show a few times. She's kind of a recurring guest on our talk show on Thursdays. But what was really interesting was, and I knew this was true, but I didn't really have confirmation, but she spoke to some people about this, is that a lot of very radical groups, and this goes for, you know, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, but also skinheads, neo-Nazis, radical Islamists, etc. These kinds of groups, they attract men like incels to join them, because these men are looking for a place to belong. They're looking for
they're hurt, they're lonely,
they're hurt,
they're
they're looking for a cause though. See, like this is something I've been talking about recently, is that men, I think, need a purpose more than anything else. They need a purpose because they don't feel like their existence alone is enough. And that's even without all of the negative messaging that men get. They need something to do. And so if no one is giving them anything, and then this, you know, radical person from whatever group X comes along and says, you know, where you would be most useful is here, then they will probably, there's a good chance they'll join. And I think that there's probably guys in the KKK that are there because they are looking for, like, oh, this is a cause I want to serve, right? Just like people that are part of Antifa or other radical communist groups or whatever, they're mostly men that don't really even understand the cause. They just like the feeling of belonging to something, you know? Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Yeah. I got a super chat from Albatross, gives us $5 and says, happy Labor Day, y'all. Well, that's a weird way of saying happy birthday, but thank you. As it's also Labor Day. Yeah, so I'm sorry. OIC gives us $1 on Rumble and says Daryl Davis turns enemies into nakama. What a weeb. I don't get the reference, but
No idea what that means.
yeah, I don't know either. I think it's an anime thing. Sorry, I don't know. But anyway, so I guess like I don't think that. I mean, I just wanted to make sure, but I don't think we really disagree on much.
I don't think we do. No, like, and I wasn't attacking you. I was.
I know you weren't. I know you weren't. But like when I hear, I hear a lot. Like this has actually been happening a lot with, women in the men's movement, and I'm not including you in this, but I've seen women that have been like, they come into it because they're interested and they're sympathetic and they understand the issues. Maybe they know somebody, a man that was done dirty by some issue, right? And they get involved and they start talking to people and they realize they get exposed to just how angry some men are at their situation. And I think that some recoil, like they go, "Oh, well, that's too much for me." Yeah. And so, we've seen that. And so sometimes when I hear, criticisms, I just want to clarify. That's why I kind of went in with a little bit of, well, let's see what's going on here. Did somebody like say something edgy or what? Because yeah, there is a lot of pain in this movement. I mean, I'm not one. I've been fortunate enough not to have been necessarily a victim of any of it, but I know people who have. I know guys going through hard divorces, lost access to their kids, have become self-destructive, which is kind of like a slow suicide. So yeah, I know that happens, and I get that, like, the last thing a man in pain wants to hear is that he has to be considerate of somebody else's feelings, right?
Yeah, of course.
So
yeah, and that's an interesting process too, which is why I was kind of critical of the Facebook group for being open to the public while also hosting those discussions, where like those should really be those should really be conversations that happen somewhere privately, because they need to happen. They need to get that out of their system. They need to find a place where people are sympathetic to their pain, without like advertising men's rights advocacy as red pill rage. Yeah.
I get that. So, so you've chilled out, you've touched grass. Is there anything else? Or is that mainly the thing that you think has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot more like nuanced ideas of kind of like the state of, the gender dynamic and men's issues. And, I didn't used to see, feminism as an inherently sort of traditionalist movement. And I kind of came to notice that when I started to realize that they were saying the same things, and, that they claim to be against gender roles, but promote this notion that women are like silly and helpless and, oh, I'm just a girl. And, and they demand chivalry from men when it suits them. And
yeah, I think that it's basically like both of them, and I hate to put it this way because it sounds like a dichotomy, like a binary thing, but feminism and the way that we've always done things in the past, or traditionalism, are basically asking the same thing of men, except that the traditionalists sometimes say thank you, and that's the only real difference. Yeah,
exactly.
So
and I get frustrated when I talk to people who like they lean towards that traditionalist perspective, and they talk about, well, I don't really think we can overcome gynocentrism, and I don't really think we can reach a world where men's bodies don't need to be sacrificed. And I ask them like, okay, so what's your goal? And they're like, I just want to be thanked for it.
Mm-hmm.
And on one hand, like, I sympathize with that. And on the other hand, I'm like, man, you got to reach higher than that, dude. Like, we can do, but we're humans. We've done, we've got pocket computers.
Yeah.
We've done so many things as a species. Like, we can reach a point where we respect and love both, sides of the gender coin.
Yeah, sure. Do you think we could live in a world is what I meant to say, where there will, obviously there will always be suffering, right? So I'm trying to think like, I think it's we want to try to create as much justice as possible, and we want to reduce the possibility of needless strife and suffering. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think there will always be war, and there will always be men, and maybe some women willing to make the sacrifice for that. So it's probably at the very least good that we recognize that. And like, men don't need much, you know. Women are really, really good at motivating men. It's actually like what men look for. So I don't know if I think that gynocentrism can be resisted, and I think that there are logical ways to do so, right? Like, you know, take the Amber Heard case, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. I think that people have woken up to that, because you have you have this woman, and she's doing things that you never thought were possible, and then you have this man that despite being really popular with women, you know, he was been sort of portrayed as this, like, this, I don't know, just violent guy, and a lot of people bought into it. It took us watching the trial unfold and talking, and I was surprised. I think that the Johnny Depp trial is a big turning point. I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, but have you noticed that in the mainstream discourse, the word misandry is being used?
I have. I actually have. And I've noticed something else, and this is because my sphere is specifically in like the abuse discourse, is where I tend to hang out. I've noticed that kind of since like the Red Pill documentary era, I've seen an uptick in people who are like more willing to say like abusers rather than men, or people who are more likely to say like victims or survivors rather than women, and like acknowledge that this is not necessarily a gendered phenomenon at all.
So the language is changing.
It is. So like I see that as like a tremendous amount of progress. Like, I mean, the policy needs to change. Needs to change dramatically. But I think, you know, step one is making people aware of the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we do here. And I do think it's changing. What do you think about we're almost at the hour, but I will ask you another question. What do you think about the people that are kind of, I wouldn't say in this doing the same work, but they're kind of traveling in the same circles, that are talking about men and women, either from a, you know, I know that you specialize in the abuse and sexual assault areas, but I guess what I'm seeing that's really popular now is like relationships, dating, marriage, that kind of thing. So people like the, you know, Fresh and Fits or Pearl. Have you heard about these people? Do you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's gonna depend on the advice, right? Like, I'm always happy for there to be like discourse on how to have a healthy relationship. I think a lot of the stuff that's kind of marketed as manosphere stuff in that realm is like a whole bunch of Victorian era sexual morality with like a lot of demands on both women and men that are very like sort of regimented. And, you know, like I don't particularly care for like, I think Pearl's message is more about abstinence than it is about anything else. Like looking at her content, where I'm like, yeah, you talk about men's issues occasionally, you talk about double standards, which is completely legitimate. But I do see a lot of the relationship complaints in the manosphere as being like, somebody dumped me, is this a men's issue? Or somebody's having sex, is this a men's issue? And I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, it's a personal issue. If it's a problem, then resolve it interpersonally.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I get it. I mean, it's not how I would approach these conversations or even what I'm interested in. My primary focus is like, look, I don't care how you arrange your relationships, but right. I want it to be something that men and women feel comfortable with at the end of the day. And I think, you know, whatever works best, because like our population is collapsing. So I'm a little worried about that. You know, we're not having enough kids, and it's not in like 2 generations. I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But, or the Amish will just take over. I don't know, because they're having like 10 or 20 kids.
You know, the religious groups with their bajillion children.
Yeah, right. But
And then
anyway,
we'll really be worried about the
yeah,
traditionalist.
then I'll have
taking
to
over the
brush up.
movements.
You have to brush up on my Aramaic or something. But last thing I guess is that what are you working? Are you working on anything right now? If somebody's interested in following what you do, where would they go for that?
I mean, I've got that egalitarian jackalope blog.
I put a link in the description for that.
Okay, cool. That's, I mean, honestly, most of what I do is just talk to people. I've had little projects off and on, you know, they come and they go. Like I navigate toward people and work on something, and then we do it or we don't do it, and then I move on.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do is like just kind of local stuff. Like at one point, a buddy of mine and I like walked all the way up and down our like main street in our city and just like put domestic violence resources in all the men's bathrooms, and you know, the women's too, but like the men's are the ones that need them because they don't get them.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a lot of my projects are like that.
That's cool. That's cool.
But yeah, I mean, people are welcome to hit me up if they want to work with me on something. That's I'm always looking for cool stuff to do.
Nice. All right, so I did get another super chow from Zeranx for $5.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you.
And he says, I've been saying for years that gynocentrism has to be tempered. Anyone, I think he means to say, come across wants to get rid of it. I don't see how we can recognize women as the bottleneck to human proliferation. That's why we protect women. I think tempering it will work if we keep it in mind. How good a society is can be based on how its women are treated and what it accepts from said women, especially with types like Fresh and Fit and Tate talking about how they'll give their daughters everything and make their sons work hard. I think that idea will put some form of boundaries around women since we blew them out with birth control and voting rights without responsibilities to the state like men. And then he gives another $5 and says, happy birthday, Brian.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you.
That's the wrong thank you. I meant to do this one.
Thank you. Come again.
All right. So, yeah. I don't know if you wanted to say anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, rights and responsibilities definitely need to come together. I mean, I would love, like, the voting thing, I think is a really interesting conversation. Like, I would have much rather just men not to have been drafted. You know, because if you're in a democracy, like voting is the responsibility, right? Like you need to be informed. You need to like think carefully and
have skin in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, your skin in the game is that you live there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that we need to be drafted in order to have skin in the game. But I do think that whatever responsibility is the reciprocal end of that voting right needs to be universal, not just men, not just women. It needs to be everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there has to be like I think the way it's arranged right now is just bad for everybody. And Mark Angelucci, rest in peace, was fighting to change that. But I think someone else is going to have to pick up the torch. And
I hope they do. I was really excited about the progress he was making with that.
Yeah. It's a real shame that happened. All right. So anyway, we're going to go into the patron-only show, guys. So if you want to join us, you have to become a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com, setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into our Discord, which is where our community is. And there are a lot of lovely people here that love to talk about these things. And yeah, it's just a really good time. There's lots of extra content. There's lots of activities. There's like people have workshops and all kinds of cool stuff for men. It's a good resource, but for women too. We have women in there definitely. Please though, go to feedthebadger.com. And if you give it higher levels, you have more access. Right now, we're going to be doing a Zoom call. We're going to continue this call, and we're going to probably have at least 1 or 2 people join us in the call itself. So that's feedthebadger.com to start a monthly subscription. So I want to thank Elizabeth for coming on. It's nice meeting you in person. Well, sort of in person. Virtually. I've only like read your posts with the little profile picture, so I've never spoken to you, in person. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your perspective. And I want to thank you guys for joining us on the show. If you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you think about what we discussed in the show today, and please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.